Tonight, a new show with David Barton, Foundations in Freedom. We're going to use the Oval Office as a classroom because I think it's time to teach the real lessons in American history. The great examples of how presidents reacted to the very same things that we have facing us today. America needs to know, where does the Second Amendment even come from? Why do we have it? Is it about sports? Have any of our presidents ever faced anything like this, and how did we get here? The history of our why and how it has shaped the things that we now have and we now believe in. The foundations of freedom. David Barton, founder and president of Wall Builders, author of the Second Amendment, Preserving the Inalienable Right of Individual Self-Protection. Do I have these books? I think I have these books right here. Little teeny books, easy to read. How are you, David?
Good, man.
Good to see you. Did you have a good Christmas?
Had a great Christmas.
Good.
Yeah, great Christmas.
So let's start here, David. Let's just start at the beginning. I cannot find NASCAR in the Constitution. Can't find it. It's not about sports. It is about what? The Second Amendment.
Principles. It's about a certain set of principles. And when you look at the Second Amendment, one of the mistakes we make is to separate the Second Amendment from the other amendments. Because whether it's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, they all came from the same thought. And the same thought was you have a certain set of rights that have to be protected from the intrusion of government. Now, we've numbered them just for ease. The Second Amendment is no different from the Third Amendment or the Fifth Amendment, private property protection, or the First Amendment, protection of religious conscience. It's an inalienable right. And that concept of that inalienable right, and all of those rights are considered inalienable rights. Okay,
let me go, before we go to an inalienable right, let me go here on the 10. Is there a coincidence, and maybe there is, that there's 10 commandments and there's 10 in the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, it is, because the Founding Fathers actually gave us 12 in the Bill of Rights. And so the original Bill of Rights was 12. The first two did not get initially ratified. One of them did, and it became the 27th Amendment back in '92. So 11 of the 12 initial ones passed, but the Bill of Rights, no.
Okay. So these are things that they said, I will not be part of this unless we do these things. You have to promise you will never, ever violate these things. And an inalienable right, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That you were created.
That all men are endowed with their Creator with certain inalienable rights.
You were created, and God gave you these rights. Yeah. Right? And so inalienable means that they were given to you by God, and no one can take them away.
That's right. Well, no one should take them away. And that was what made our government different, is our philosophy is, everybody in the world's got God-given rights, but all over the world they get trampled on. All over the world, governments trample those rights. What made us different was we said, we're not going to let government touch those rights. Those came from God. That would be like me coming into your yard and saying, you know, Glenn, your sidewalk, I think is too narrow. I'm going to make it broad. I got no right to come into your yard and change your things. Since God gave those rights, government has no right to go into his yard and start messing with what he did. If he gave the rights, you leave him alone. That's what made us so unique. Was unlike any country in Europe, we said, hey, there's certain things that you don't touch because God gave them. Now, we'll mess with these enumerated powers, the 18 enumerated powers in Article 1, etc., but we're not messing with these things. They're off limits to government. That's what made us different. Everybody gets those rights, but not everybody gets to enjoy those rights.
Did you have a right in the state to do any of those things?
You did, because the Founding Fathers used a philosophy term that came out of the law books of the day that really went back into the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, when they used the term in the Declaration, and they said, we're setting forth for the world why we're doing all this stuff. And they set the standard as the laws of nature and nature's God. That is a legal term, 8 words that comprises 2 ways that God revealed himself. One is through creation, the other is through his scriptures. Now, this is actually the legal book in which all that's contained. Blackstone's Commentaries on the Law, 1766, most famous law book of the day. So the founders used that because everybody knows what it means. It's a well-established term. It's been since the Magna Carta that we've been using this back in the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s. And it says, all right, there are certain things that come to you that are in nature, one of which is the right of self-defense. I'm a horse guy. I'm a cowboy. But I can have a great mare, great trail horse that I take everywhere. When she has a young foal if I go in the barn, despite the fact I've been feeding her her whole life, if I go in the barn and start messing with that foal, I'm likely to find a hoof print in the middle of my forehead because there's something in her that kicks in and says, protect my young. This barn's my turf. You're not supposed to be on my... It just kicks in naturally. That's a law of nature to defend yourself. It's a law of the Scriptures as well.
So that's where you get the Second Amendment. You have the right to keep and bear arms.
That's right.
Because if somebody comes into your house, you have a right to bear arms. But
Let me go further than that. Now, I'm going to take it further than a right, because the guy who really did a lot of good work on this is a guy named James Wilson, signer of the Declaration and Constitution. Wilson's put on the U.S. Supreme Court with George Washington. This is the first American law book that was used in the first American law school. And so here's a guy who helped do all this stuff. And he says, not only do you have a right to defend your home, this is where we get the term castle doctrine. Matter of fact, let me just read part of what he says here. He says, homicide is required when it's necessary for the defense of one's person or one's house property. It is the great natural law of self-preservation that, as we have seen, cannot be repealed or superseded by any human institution. It comes from God. This law, however, is expressly recognized in the Constitution, and he said every man's house is deemed by the law to be his castle, and the law, while it invests him with the power, it places on him the duty of commanding officer of his house. Every man's house is his castle, and if he is robbed in it, it will be esteemed his own default and negligence. If something occurs in your house, you don't blame the cops, you don't blame the police, you don't blame anybody. You're supposed to defend your house.
This is where I've been on this for the last couple of weeks, that we keep talking about first responders. You got to wait for the first responders.
That's us.
Wait for the first. We are the first responders. We're the first responders.
Yeah.
They're our backup.
Yeah.
I need backup.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Instead, you say, I need help. No, you need backup.
Yeah, that's right. And they're supposed to be there to punish the guy after you take care of him if there's anything left. You know, once you catch a crook. And a number of times we know that happened. People have held people at gunpoint until the police get there. All right, they're the civil justice. They do the justice side. You don't do the justice side. You do the defense side. You're there for the defense of your home, your property, your kids, your life,
Okay.
etc.
So when we come back, let's move out of the house and say, is it just really about defense of your house? Is it just about hunting? Or is there something more, and back up the claims that it is to protect yourself from an out-of-control government?
All right.
Next.
Good.